Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. Let's just see if we are happening here. I see my Facebook. Now, where is my YouTube? Oh, YouTube, where have you gone? Where's that window? Isn't that weird? Can't get the Safari window. Oh, there we are. And we'll get a YouTube up here and make sure that that link is working for me too. I'm a little later than I wanted to be, admittedly. There's always something that comes to me at the last second. I go, oh my gosh, right, there's that. Oh, right, there's that. Oh, right, there's that. And inevitably, I don't think of everything just before I start. Okay, there we go. I'll get rid of my sound on YouTube so I don't get it back through the system. Okay, it looks like we are live on YouTube, and it looks like we are also live on Facebook. So that's fantastic. So I will now let me get my Facebook. There we go. Hello, Lynn. I am fine. Thank you. Let's see who else is here. Oh, there's quite a lot of you. Hi, Daryl. That's sweet of you to say that. Thank you very much. Um, Don's ex Borneo. Teach you everything. Well, I'll be happy to. We've got an hour. Murray Harrison, can you talk about Michael Hedges and his influence in your playing? I certainly can. Yep, you're live. Thank you, Corey. Hi, Stealth Parrot. Abel Diaz Urbina. Hi, Don. I wish you well too. Thank you very much, Abel. Hi, Castine. Nice to see you. Renee, nice to see you too. Lucas, Brian. Hey, Brian. Nice to see you too. Paul, you just bought 2 more acoustics. You blame me. Oh, well, it's good to have somebody to blame. I always say, isn't it convenient? I just did some work with Bruce Coburn recently, and I told him the story about how I sort of made the big decision to sort of get into fingerstyle guitar in a really serious way when I was about 14, and he just said, "Don't blame me." Mm. Anyway, it's nice to see everybody, and I'm sure more and more people will be showing up. This is a weekly stream that I do with my folks on the Don Ross Guitar Academy. It's a little online teaching academy that my wife Brooke Miller and I set up as a pandemic project, and we produced a whole bunch of short lesson videos for it. And I need to create some more stuff for it. There's a bunch of beginner level stuff and a bunch of intermediate level stuff, and I need to create some more intermediate and advanced level stuff. So I'll be doing that in the coming months. Okay, I'm already seeing some questions. So hi, Tim, the man, the myth, the legend that will last all lunchtime, in the words of the Ruddles. Okie dokie. So let's just go through your questions. Murray, can I talk about Michael Hedges and his influence on your playing? Yes, I first became aware of Michael Hedges playing in 1984. I was quite young. I bought one of those Windham Hill sampler albums. It was the 1984 sampler, I remember. And there was all kinds of good stuff on it, but the very first track on the album was Aerial Boundaries. And of course, that's sort of become Michael's definitive piece, for solo guitar. And it's an astounding piece of music because nothing like it had ever really been written before that. And really nothing like it has ever been written since. There are people who used Michael's influence as a starting point for a lot of their own music, and that's great. Everybody influences everybody else. But people focused very often on the ostinato, this kind of thing. And that became a bit of a cliche after a while. So I consciously kind of avoided writing too many pieces of music that used ostinatos because I didn't want people to think, oh, he's just trying to sound like Michael Hedges. It's important to be an individual on the instrument. So he certainly was an influence, though. Michael was a few years older than me, but he had a similar musical background to mine in terms of how he studied and stuff like that. He got into music around the same time I did. The guitar for both him and me is a convenient, very portable, very small way of creating polyphonic music and being able to travel from place to place with it. And I think in both of our cases, we sort of stumbled upon the idea of becoming solo performing musicians to make a living. Um, and, in the case of touring and all that kind of stuff, the cheapest and easiest way to do it, of course, is to do it by yourself, because you don't have a band that you're always fighting with, or you don't have to do all kinds of logistical things. But people like Michael and Leo Kottke, and to another extent Bruce Cockburn, and a bunch of other people, Joni Mitchell among them, inspired me early on as to the possibilities of what you can do just on your own, with just nothing but your voice and a guitar, and not necessarily be seen as a folk singer. Even Michael Hedges, very often when he was interviewed, people would say, well, can you put a classification on your music? He says, well, if anything, he says, probably the best bin to find me in the record store back then is like the folk music section. But he says it's kind of a dead category, though, and that people have these very strong associations with either traditional music or the folk scare of the 1960s, and what both Michael and I were doing was more along the lines of contemporary experimental, very modern music. So influenced by a whole lot of people like Edgar Varese and Steve Reich and Keith Jarrett and Yanis Xenakis and all these amazing composers from the 20th century, especially, and into the 21st. Michael unfortunately didn't live into the 21st century, but he's ended up, of course, becoming a huge influence on a lot of us in terms of trying to extend the boundaries of what was normally considered the acceptable norm on the acoustic guitar. And that acceptable norm continues to this day. Most people still, gravitate towards guitar playing that is a little more standard, a little more up the middle. But there are people who are really, what's that word? Something the envelope. They're stretching the envelope, bending the envelope, extending the envelope. There's a term for that. I've forgotten it right now. But people like Petteri Sariola out of Finland, and Alex Misko out of Russia, and Callum Graham out of here in Canada, Antoine Zufour, John Gom, all these modern voices on the guitar, many of whom will acknowledge Michael's influence quite readily on what they do. So I think he's had an influence on a lot of us. For me, it's been kind of more of a spiritual influence and an influence as an artist. I don't try to sound like him necessarily, but at the same time, I think we're inspired by a lot of the same musics that came before. And when we got to know each other, we realized we compared notes, and we had almost the same music education, a very 20th century, very forward-thinking music education. He went to Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, and I went to York University in Toronto. They had the same kind of philosophy behind their educational systems. So hope that answers your question. Let's look at another couple of things that have come in here. Paul Sylvester asks, what piece did you play in rehearsal in your first appearance at Parliament Hill in the late 1980s? From Ben in Winnipeg. The answer is Thin Air. So you have the question and the answer. That's excellent. So playing my rehearsal. Oh, okay. Yeah, was it the late 1980s, Parliament Hill? I think it seems to me, yeah, you're probably right, because I remember Brian Mulroney was Prime Minister. I played the protocolaire, what do they call it in English? It's the midday show on Canada Day on Parliament Hill one year. Like, they have a big blowout, in the evening. It's kind of a big rock show. But then they have this more sort of formal event, at least they did then, at midday. And, the military band plays, and they've got a few artists who sing and play, and there's some speeches made and stuff. Anyway, I remember everybody was in a good mood because it was Canada Day, and even though Brian Mulroney was already not very popular, he still glad-handed his way through the crowd. But thanks for your question and answer, Paul. That's fantastic. Oh, Ben in Winnipeg, even though it says Paul Sylvester. Okay, confusing. All right, that's cool. Gate Heaven asks, you really want to know the tuning that I used on Jimmy Wallstein's track, It's Your Favorite? Okay, so if you do a YouTube, it's a great question. If you do a YouTube search for this tune called It's Your Favorite, Jimmy Wallstein at the time, this is around 2010, he was really striking out on his own as a solo guitar player. He sort of gone more back into being a music director for television and stuff like that in his native Sweden. But he and I ended up being represented by the same booking agent in Germany, and we became fast friends, and I really liked his music. So he came here to Canada when I was living in Nova Scotia, and we did some shows, and we decided to, on a lark, to record a couple of songs just outside my studio that I had at the time. So if you know Halifax, Nova Scotia at all, it's a really groovy town, and there's this really groovy street that's getting groovier by the minute, getting more gentrified and expensive, but it's called Agricola Street. It's named after this guy who wrote sort of an agricultural newsletter back in the 19th century. Seriously. The guy was, I forget his real name, but everybody called him Agricola, which means farmer in Latin. So on Agricola Street, I rented this really cool space and had it set up as my project recording studio, which is what this space here on Prince Edward Island is now, where I live now. But back then I had like a space separate from my house. And it had a little parking lot in front of it, and then Agricola Street was right there. So Jimmy and I set up with our guitars, set microphones in front of our guitars, plugged in as well so we could control the ambient noise, and recorded a couple of live things. So we did It's Your Favorite, and we did Klim Bim. And Klim Bim even has a fire truck going through it. We just left the siren in for fun because it was crazy. Anyway, I don't know what tuning Jimmy uses, because he always capos up on that one and tunes in this weird tuning that he likes to use. But what I used was an adaptation. I think it was the same tuning as I use for my piece called Brooks Waltz. So, because I think the piece was in C, it sounded in C, and so the tuning I was using was CGC. CGD. It's been a while. I'll have to think about it. CGD, G, and then A, and then D. Yeah. So, Brooks Waltz is like, oh no, it is a C. Did I tune it to C? I must have used the same tuning. So this tuning, CG, CG, AD, ends up being very similar to drop D tuning, but a tone lower, if that doesn't screw you up too much. So drop D tuning is just standard tuning, but with a low D on the low E string. And for this, basically, you drop all the strings a tone lower, except for the third one. So you end up with C, G, C. So that sounds like the bottom three strings in drop D, only it's in C. And then the third string stays at a G. So instead of having the F, which you would normally have if it were standard tuning, as G, and then A, D. So you could play what looks an awful lot like a D chord, right? But if you leave your finger off, it sounds like the same voicing as a D in drop D tuning, but it sounds in C in this case because I'm tuned all the way down to C. So you can hear it, you can see that a lot of the finger positions for Brooks Waltz, I'm not playing it very well. They look a lot like standard tuning, or drop D tuning. So for It's Your Favorite, what I did was I took the same tuning, I think. See how close it is to standard, to drop D. da da da. Sound like that I've forgotten. Da 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 da. So that's the tuning I used. C G C G A D. Same as Brooks Waltz. If you want a listing of all my tunings, if you go to my website, which is donrossonline.com, I'll create a little link to that on the screen. donrossonline.com, there is a tuning page. So you just look on the menu and click on tunings, and every tuning for every tune I've ever recorded is there. Okay, there you go. Okay, oh, you're welcome, Tim. Thanks for dropping in. You can always catch the repeat. Sorry you have to go. All right, let's see who else. Thank you for being. You're welcome, Esteban. After a show in Hamilton in 2007, you shared with some of us audience folk that you write your songs on piano before moving. Before moving them to guitar. This is a revelation to me. Being a musician before associating with a specific instrument. Does this still hold true for you? Have you ever done the reverse and written a piano track on the guitar? Yes to all of that. So, Gordon, I don't always write on the piano, but I often do. And the other thing I often do is just write in my head, like I've got like a really strong groove idea or bass run or a set of changes or a melody or whatever. It's just looping in my head. And then, okay, I think I know how to achieve that on the instrument. There was a piece famously that I wrote in my sleep, which doesn't happen very often, but a piece called Island of Women that I wrote a long time ago. It was on my third album, I think. And it's got a wild set of changes in it. It goes like A minor 9 to F major, F sharp minor to G major 7 to F sharp 11, E minor 11, A add 9 over C sharp. Anyway, it's good, beautiful changes. And I just happened to like dream this tune and remember it in the morning, but there was only a piano nearby. I was on holiday, so I figured it out on the piano. And I like working that way because I do have this, you can't see it, but there's like a MIDI keyboard in front of me that I use a lot for doing orchestral scores. As you can see, I've got a million speakers around here. I do a lot of writing for video games and film a lot these days, and I mix in Dolby Atmos on this huge array of speakers. And I do a lot of the work, especially for orchestration, directly on the keyboard because I have some piano skills. I'm not the world's greatest piano player, but I can play well enough. And I can usually work out my ideas. Sometimes working out voicing ideas for other instruments on the piano is a little easier than it is on the guitar. But I still sometimes write on the piano and then transcribe the piece for guitar. I like writing that way. I think it's a really handy dandy way. On my latest album, there's a piece for orchestra, for guitar and orchestra, and there's also a piano part in it. And so the piece started off as a piano piece with orchestra. And then I adapted the piano part basically for guitar and came up with sort of some harmonies to it and then take a little solo in the middle on guitar. So that very much started as a piano piece and then became a piece for both piano and guitar and orchestra. So that piece is called The World Didn't Change After All. So you can check that out on the streams. Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. I'll just sort of try to go back and forth between YouTube and Facebook. Okay. Wallstein, you got that. Have you ever listened to Topeka by John Gaume? I don't know if I know that piece of music. Sorry, Gate Heaven. I'll check it out, though. Can I play Michael, Michael, Michael? Sure, I'll play that in a minute. Stealth Parrot, do you remember playing at Home County Festival back in the 80s? That was the first time I saw you live and you were playing the first ride. My wife and I sat down and were blown away. Well, I was asked to play that festival several times, especially when the late Ken Palmer was the AD there. He had me back 3 or 4 times. And then even since he passed on, I've been asked back a few times. It's a wonderful festival. I remember one year playing there and I was feeling very silly. So I brought a pair of long striped shorts and like clown shorts. And then at the little sort of arts and crafts booths, I bought a shirt that had been splattered with different colors. And so almost tie-dye style. So I wore this crazy t-shirt and these crazy pants. And of course I had really long hair and a big beard. And I came out and I played Loaded Leather Moonroof was my first tune. And the crowd literally rushed the stage. It was a lot of fun. I felt like such a rock star. such a rock star. I remember too, I had just come back from California. I'd done this little Californian tour and it sold all my CDs. So I went directly to London and had no CDs to sell. And the people who ran the merch table said, you could have sold like a couple of grand worth of CDs today. Thank you, Prodigal Nation. I'm glad you like the music so much. Corey, subjective question. You've been playing for 17 years plus and you consider yourself upper end or immediate or lower advanced. Will I get more benefit from your DRGA intermediate or entire Jam Play series? Well, it depends. The Jam Play series are each, I think, a different kind of subject in each of them. There's one where I do kind of more theory for guitarists, and then there's another one where I do the beginnings of Travis picking and stuff like that. I don't know. I haven't created tons of intermediate material yet for the DRGA, but that's probably the best place to start. The thing about the DRGA thing is that it's only $19.95 US a month to subscribe, and you can subscribe for a month and then quit. If you get whatever you need out of the website, you don't have to stick there for a year. So it's a come and go kind of thing. Or if you decide, I want to subscribe for a month now, and I'll come back in 6 months and brush up. That's fine too. So I would just suggest dipping your toes into it. The Jam Play series are good though; they're really excellent. But I did them a while ago, so I even have a hard time remembering exactly what I taught in them. Vanessa, I don't speak English, but your music is wonderful. Greetings from Argentina. Aw, that's very nice. Gracias. Muchas gracias. What string do I use? I use the... do I have any sets here? I don't. I use the Ernie Ball aluminum bronze strings. They're great. I was approached by the Ernie Ball people a number of years ago about switching. I had a long association with John Pierce, and I was using their phosphor bronze strings. I really liked them. And then Ernie Ball said, do you want to... And there was just a point where with John Pierce, it became more and more difficult. The communication with the company became more difficult after John himself passed away. So anyway, Ernie Ball approached me, and it took me about 6 months to get around to saying yes, only because I found it hard to get used to the way the strings sounded. With the phosphor bronze strings, you get a lot of high upper partials, and with these ones, you get a stronger fundamental. So it's a very different way that they sound. But I got used to that, and eventually said, why not? There was a request for Michael, so I'm not far from that tuning. So I'll at least play maybe a Reader's Digest, a condensed version of it. Here's a little bit of Michael. So I'll wrap it up a bit earlier. I said, the Reader's Digest condensed version. I just left out a big repeat there of the A section. All right, so that was Michael. I wrote that right almost exactly around the time that Michael passed away. Michael Hedges passed away in 1997. It was crazy. It was supposed to be a duet for he and I to record together, but that unfortunately never got to happen. Do I have any warm-up exercises that I like to do? Says Nate Lopez, 8-string guitarist. Holy smokes. Well, it depends. It depends on how long it's been since the last time I played. For like 30 years straight, I was almost always touring. I mean, I say almost always. Most of the year, I'd say, with the exception, like, I find that January, June, and September tend to be the slowest months of the year for touring, and the latter half of December as well. Otherwise, almost everything else is open season for touring. And I relied very, very much on touring for my living until the pandemic happened. So I found that during that time, I was always so well practiced and so well warmed up. It was just like doing, whatever, 100 shows a year, 120 shows a year, and rehearsing and recording and everything else, that there just wasn't much call for it. Now, what I found that when the pandemic hit and I went back to school and did my orchestration degree online through the University of Chichester, I was working a lot on keyboard, and I was still doing overdubs and stuff like that on the guitar, and I was still writing new guitar music, but I wasn't playing every day. I wasn't playing in front of people. I wasn't practicing. And then by practice, I mostly mean just playing in front of people. So I found that when there was a chance, like on rare occasion when things got safe enough to, say, do an outdoor show or whatever during the pandemic, I felt really rusty. I would have to like sit down for a day or two before and say, I got to run through my repertoire, got to make sure I can remember it, for one thing. It's easy for details to start flying away when you don't play the tunes regularly. And I mean, I have hours and hours of repertoire memorized in my head, so it's like it's easy for some of that to go if you don't practice it regularly. So I found during the pandemic, I had to be very conscious of making sure that I played on a regular basis and that I actually let myself warm up. So there's a few warm-ups I do sometimes. I don't do them all the time. One of the ones is, it's very boring and very non-musical, but it's really to get your left hand going. The rule of thumb, pardon the pun, most of the time with left-hand fingering is one finger per fret. So, open string, and then first fret, first finger, second fret, second finger, third fret, third finger, etc., right? All the way up to 4. And then, so you can do, now if you're in standard tuning, you're attuned to fourths, and this will sound more chromatic, but you can do it in any tuning that you're in. You can just do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 on all the strings. And then do it in reverse. Now, again, as unmusical as that is, it's just a warm-up exercise. It's like doing your stretches before you work out, And then the idea is to do it a little bit faster. And in my right hand, it's hard to see because it's a little off the camera, but I'm alternating between my thumb and my index fingers. So it becomes a bit of an exercise there in alternating. You can also do it between your index and middle fingers, etc. And then same descending. But what it does is it really develops strength in your fingers, also coordination, and also gets you attuned to the whole idea of a finger per fret, so that you don't end up being the kind of person who plays like this all the time. Spreads over 2 frets with one finger. That's really awkward. Or uses, fingers 1 and 4 just to go 2 frets. Those kinds of things that, they become like muscle memory that you program into your left hand. All right, let's look at more questions here. Bing, bing, bing. Let's see now. I don't speak English, but your music is wonderful. I saw that one already. Thank you again. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Let's see. I want to know if you'll be performing again in Nova Scotia in the upcoming months or later in the year. I just played in Halifax at the Carlton with Pipo Romero in May, so about a month ago or 3 weeks ago. I'm sure I'll be back soon since it's so close. But I'm trying to get my fall and next winter schedule together. I have the new album out to promote, so I need to get back out on the road on a regular basis. So I'm putting together something for the fall, probably in the Maritimes, and then I'll probably do some Ontario touring in the spring, and a smattering of things here and there. But the best thing to do is to check my website. Here, I'm going to add that to the mix here. If I can find the right window, here we go. I will make sure that that is there. New text overlay. Here we go. DonRossOnline.com. And there we go. Excuse me. So that's my website. So if you go there, there's always lots of information about touring, my tunings, my e-store where you can buy recordings if you want, and t-shirts and whatever other kinds of nonsense I think to sell on there. Yeah, great. Do you plan to come to Taiwan? Man, I used to come to Taiwan often. Isn't that funny? About 20 years ago, I was contacted back then. I had an album that came out called Passion Session that was well distributed around the world and did quite well on Amazon back in the day when people bought CDs off Amazon. And I was contacted by a producer there who's also a very well-known singer. And he had me come over and do a bunch of recording in his studio. I also did a bunch of arrangements for acoustic guitar for, he wanted to start sort of an acoustic label, but unfortunately it was right around the time that Napster happened. So I came to Taiwan several times. I did some touring. I played a couple of times in Taipei. I played in Tainan. I played in Kaohsiung, and one or two other places. And so I would love to come back because I get such a kick out of playing there, but I haven't been in many years. I've done some touring in mainland China, but not since 2017. So that's been a while. But yeah, I'll come back to Taiwan sometime, I hope. Yeah. Brian, can I talk a little bit about my arrangement at Berkeley Springs? It's so open and full sounding compared to the original. I mostly use standards, so it can be tough to get into that sort of feeling in my arrangements. Great question, Brian. The original tune, a very beautiful tune by David Essig, that's who wrote Berkeley Springs. He wrote it in DADGAD tuning originally. So his version is very beautiful, but the way he played it in the original, the way he wrote it, it almost sounds like a kind of a laid back, like march almost, Da 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 dum da dum bum ba bum bum. It's to me it always felt like it had this step to it, But I always thought the melody was so beautiful in that tune, and so what I did instead of playing it in DADGAD tuning, I played it in open F tuning. Now, open F is a bit unusual. I think my strings are relatively new, so they should take it okay. So, that's about an F. And then the fifth string is tuned to an A. I'll actually turn my tuner on just so that if you want to tune to this later and you want to be somewhere close to real tuning. So then the third string goes down to an F. The second string goes up to a C. And the first string goes up to an F. Now, it was all the way down at a C, so here's hoping. But these are new strings, so shouldn't get them any big breaks or anything. The interesting thing about Open F is that it has enough in common with DADGAD that you can actually translate some of the fingerings directly over. Because Dadgad, you have an A and a D in the top two strings, and so in the original key, which was D, the high string is the tonic, and then the second string is the fourth. The fourth below that, so it's the fifth of the key. So it's the A is the fifth of D, and in this case, C is the fifth of F. So I could just go. That much was pretty much the exact same fingering as it would have been in D, in Dadgad rather. But the thing about this tuning, unlike Dadgad, Dadgad has no mode. And that's actually one of the best things about it. It's a suspended chord, right? It's a suspended fourth chord. So it's D-ish, but it's not D major and it's not D minor. You've got the third removed and replaced with a fourth. Cool. So it gives you this ability to play in D major or D minor really easily. It's just as easy in either case. Or you can play in the key of G, you can play in the key of C, you can play in A minor. It's so interesting that way. The Dadgad is really cool that way. I find it's even interesting in like E flat. It's crazy. Now open F is an F major chord. So it's right from the get-go, as soon as you tune yourself to a modal tuning like that, that's locked into a major mode, you're going to probably want to play in major key, right? It'd be pretty hard to play in minor in an F major tuning. It's possible, but it's a bit of a drag. So nice thing about open F is that you can get all these open strings that ring nicely, especially in a piece like that that's very diatonic. So and my whole idea was that I wanted to make it into more of a ballad. So I wanted it to be more lyrical and almost as if you were singing it. Da, 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 da. I wanted to make it very singable, The original was quite singable as well, but I wanted to make it less guitar-y and more legato. Legato just sort of means one note into the next really smoothly, right? So there's a very legato feeling to this whole piece. The second phrase is... And so this use of open strings, even that little move, and then things like that, getting the nice dissonances that you can get, because this is an F chord. Part of this is that I'm a harmony nut, right? So I think about the harmonies as I'm playing them. I don't just put my fingers in the right places. I'm actually consciously thinking, okay, I'm going to go from an F to a B flat, but I want to get there through the A minor chords. I want to go 1, 3, 4. So here's at 1, and then 3, right? And then to the 4. And that 3 chord, you have the opportunity to use this thing called an augmented sixth in it. That creates a nice dissonance between the E and the F there. It's a beautiful sort of in-between kind of chord. It's this ambiguous chord. What is that? Well, it's kind of A minor. It's also kind of F major seventh. It's kind of a lot of different things, right? But all with an A bass. So, and then later on, I'm just trying to think. That's my idea. Oops. Oh, didn't play that well. So what I did there was I went from 1, I went through major 3 to 4, which is really cool sounding, but I did it with inverted chords. So that's a first inversion of that A major chord. Just little magical things like that are, in the case of me arranging a tune, I pre-think these, they're very well considered before I do them. And then this balance between fingered notes and open strings. And the strength of the open F tuning is that you can have open strings galore, right? And still have beautiful chord voicings going on. Even the idea of where it goes down the octave. How's it go? I've forgotten how I play it. On the spot. just sort of knowing which notes to let ring. Oh, and then it goes, da, 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 da. And then I decided just to go. So rather than state the melody note for note, I hint at it at the beginning of that little thing, and then I just start. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You've heard the melody already at this point. You know how it goes, right? Even if you only heard it once or twice before this particular instance. And just the fact that it's there, it's in the harmony, you can hear it harmonized within the harmony. It makes it much more interesting than just playing single notes and sort of playing in a marchy way. And then in the original, David does this kind of almost chicken picking part, and I thought, I don't want to do that. I mean, the tune was dedicated to his mother, who grew up in West Virginia. It's named after a town in West Virginia where she grew up. So, okay, it made kind of like musical sense. But for me playing it, being an urban guy from Canada, it just didn't feel like what I wanted to do. I'm not much of a chicken picker. So I came up with that. And then throwing in the parallel fourth stack, that kind of stuff. So that whole section of the piece is really my own variation. I didn't bother taking any writing credit on the tune because the tune stood well enough alone. I just sort of, it was like a structured improv that I added to it. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I hope it's some kind of insight into how I approached it, Brian, and hopefully it helps with stuff you want to do in the future. Alrighty. Thanks, Mike. I'm glad it sounds awesome. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Edgedk8 says, you discovered my music with the big Candy Rat craze back in 2011-ish. I'm back and I'm going to sign up for the DRGA. Thank you very much. That's great. Paul says, can you move your camera so that we can see more of your right hand? Sure, I'll do that. Yes, I know I have many fans in Taiwan. I'll come back. Yes, Don's Ex Borneo, I use 13 to 56. That's the medium gauge strings I use, exactly. Daryl Duff, you're welcome. Tanzan Tunes, please, sir, take more tutorial lessons so that many guitarists will get inspired and start playing the... Thank you, I shall, okay. How did I meet Callum Graham? I first met Callum when he was very young. He was about 15, and I was playing at the Canadian Guitar Festival. It's the festival that doesn't exist anymore, but it used to happen near Kingston, Ontario, for a few years. And it's kind of where the Candy Rat thing kind of really got started. Rob Poland wanted to start an online record label once the Napster had kind of killed the record industry. Rob thought, well, let's go internet only, and I really like guitar music, so he decided to do a guitar-based label, and I was the first artist on the label. And then Rob used the Canadian Guitar Festival as kind of like his field office. He would go in and discover new players and sign them up. So that's how he discovered Antoine Dufour. Andy McKee played the competition one year, and I suggested really strongly to Rob that he sign Andy, and he did, and it worked out really well. But he also heard Robert Taylor, who was one of the first signings there, and Ewan Dobson, and there's a whole lot of players that got discovered there. A lot of the Italian guys, Stefano Barone and Pino Forestieri, they were at the Guitar Festival as well, and Rob heard them there. So Callum attended when he was 15 because that year Dell, who ran the festival, offered a chance to have 2-hour guitar lessons with various of the players who were performing there that year. So Callum booked in with me, and I taught him. He was very young, and I could see that he had lots and lots of potential. And then he started showing up for the guitar competition, and I guess he won in 2010, and he made a big impression that year. And he was still doing kind of an electric thing a lot of the time and still doing a lot of singing, but then he decided to focus on the solo guitar thing. And so then by the time he was like 21 or so, and he contacted me about doing a record together, I said, well, send me some of your new stuff. When I heard it, I went, well, yeah, no problem. You're quite a great composer already. So that's how that started. That's how I got to know Callum. Okay, let me fix my camera while I'm thinking about it here, and hopefully you can see more of my right hand. Let me just check my camera. Boink. Yeah, you should be able to see it a bit better now. All right. Okay, over to the Facebook questions. You always wondered what it would be like to hear me play Never Going Back by Fleetwood Mac. Wow. I learned that off the record when I was a kid. I don't know if I'd remember it. It's been a long time. I can try. Is it in drop D tuning? And it's capoed way up somewhere. I don't even remember where it is. It's like way up here. Oh no, I'm in a bizarre tuning. I better not do it. It'll take all day. But yeah, I have played it, Anthony. Not for a long time. Do I remember Status Quo? Wow, they're like a rock band, right, from Europe. They were really big. I'm not sure if they're British or what. They're still huge in Germany. When I tour in Germany, they're still touring over there, and they've got countless fans. People say, "Oh yeah, Status Quo, Status Quo." I don't think they were as big in Canada. I don't remember hearing much about them. Um, Love the guitar chord theory doing here. Yeah, I'm a theory banana. I love theory. It's a great way to learn so much about how music works, you know. And then guitarists, unfortunately, are notoriously weak in the theory department. So I try to encourage people to learn as much theory as they can without it slowing them down, without me feeling like a big trudge, you know. But it's fun. Learning theory is fun, just like learning harmony is fun. Um, what was the guitar specific label that I was referring to? Deborah, it was Candy Rat Records, so Candyrat Records, still going strong. I'm no longer recording with them. I decided my last record, I decided to go completely independent. That was just a personal decision, nothing to do with anything to do with the label. They're great people there. Rob and Holly and the gang, they're wonderful. So I'm still a big fan of a lot of the people on the label, and we still have a great relationship. I even did a duet with Sean Hall on one of his tunes on his new Candy Rat album. So I'm still on some Candy Rat records, but I went totally indie in the last record, and it was the smartest thing I'd done in a long time because I raised my own budget, and I could do whatever I wanted, and hired orchestras and string quintets and Michael Manring and Bruce Coburn and Sean Hall and Brooke Miller, and I did all these wonderful collaborative things on the record. So it was a lot of fun, and I have my own studio, so I mean, why the heck not, right? Um, you refer to me as the Don because you're the godfather of the guitar. Thank you. I guess that's a good thing. All right. Have I heard of Flannel Graph, Montana? Colonel Pinecone wants to know. I have not. I will check that out. I'm always happy to discover new music. I'm always listening to new music. I put a lot of new music on my Facebook page. I think some people think I'm crazy because I put all kinds of weird stuff up there, but I listen to everything. I'm not a guitar head at all. I listen to some guitar music, but I try to listen to a bit of everything. I'm really hooked on Gregory Privat. He's a French solo piano player, young guy, incredible. His new album's called Yonn, Yonn. Check it out. I really like. I really like the new Taylor Swift record. I really like. There's an electronic artist I just discovered. Oh, I'll never forget her name. I'll never remember her name now. She goes by this weird name, Piku something. I'll have to check it out. I can't remember. And I've been discovering the world of Afropop big time because I've been writing all these Afropop tunes for video games. And wow, is it ever fun! Having such a blast. All right. Your friend is dragging you to a Saga concert, Castine, in Germany, a Canadian band that's been there forever. Oh my God. Saga. They were this like, progressive rock band from the 70s in Toronto. And they never were that popular at home, but they were huge in Germany, filling arenas and all that kind of stuff. Just one of those things like a David Hasselhoff kind of thing, you know? Why? Why Saga? Why Germany? Why not, right? It's like Holly Cole in Japan, great jazz singer. She was quite popular here, but filling giant halls in Japan, you know, because acts take off for various reasons in different markets. So good luck with that. I honestly can't even think of a Saga song. I don't know how any of them go, but you'll find out. All right. Was the Bering Strait album designed as a demo or a collection of structured pieces? Ben. Hi, Ben, who goes by Paul Sylvester, which is very confusing. Yes, Bering Strait was actually what it was. It was a collection of tunes that I had written over the course of, let's see now, that album came out in 1989. I think the oldest tune on that record was written in 1979. That's when I was a teenager. So it wasn't really a collection of demos. It was meant to be a solo guitar record. But what had happened was about 2 or 3 years before that, I released a cassette album that I've kind of suppressed. Because, it was just a cassette album. It wasn't well recorded. It was really cheeseball. But that album was called Kihiwin. And it had a collection of stuff. Some of it was solo guitar music. Some of it was big, a lot of overdubs. I played all the instruments on the record. So I played guitar, piano, bass, drums, percussion, played fretless bass. I sang. I even played banjo in one tune. It was a real big mistake. Anyway, whatever. So I did it basically as a demo. That one, the Kihiwin album. So that's this little cassette record I did with my late wife, Kelly. She sang on 2 or 3 songs. And so that was meant to be a demo so that I could get work, so I was handing it out to production companies in Toronto and stuff like that. I got a little bit of work out of it, mostly as a bass player. But by the time I got signed, I had won the guitar competition in Winfield, and I got signed to a Canadian label called Duke Street. And so a lot of the same tunes, like about 5 or 6 of the same tunes that were on that demo cassette, ended up on Bering Strait, but completely re-recorded, just solo guitar in a really good studio. And that's what Bering Strait was. So, and that was my first real release. I did it for a real record company called Duke Street Records, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But thanks for the question. Tour of Japan. I've been to Japan 4 or 5 times for touring. The last time was 2017. I'm actually looking at the poster right now. I did a tour that went around Honshu Island and also went down to Amami in the far south of Japan, down where it's a lot like Hawaii. It's really nice down there. So I was supposed to come back in 2020, but we all know what happened. And so the plan is to come back soon. So maybe in 2024. I'll be back in Japan. I hope so. Saga on the Loose, according to Stealth Parrot. So check that one out, Castine. Sing with Hasselhoff. That's right. You've watched Berkeley. Daryl says he's watched Berkeley Springs on YouTube over 100 times. So you're the guy. Hi, Jerry. I don't care what you say, Don Kihiwin's a great cassette. Well, thank you very much, Jerry. That's very kind. Jerry Berrigan is an old friend, and his brother Bob is somebody that I've hung out with since I was 15. Anyway, so yeah, they have a lot of very embarrassing stuff that I don't let a lot of people listen to. Although, I know that Kihiwin's not as bad as I make it out to be, but whatever. What's my favorite chord voicing, Don Ross? Okay, I'll find it for you. It's back in standard tuning. May as well get back to standard just in case I have to play something close to it again before we close up today. Okay, so my favorite chord voicing in standard tuning. Okay, so there's E minor, right? Standard E minor. And here's E minor 7th. You can play it like this, or you can play it like this. Right? There's a few different ways of playing an E minor 7th. And then there's E minor 9th, which looks like this. Sounds like that. And then if you add one more note to that, you get an E minor 11th. So in the notes in order, if you saw them on the piano keyboard, for example, it would be E, G, B, D, F sharp, A. So it's like an E minor voicing with a D voicing on top. And that's exactly what this is. It's even better when you're in tune. But not so bad. There, it's my favorite chord. I've worked it into so many tunes. It's kind of silly. I mean, either that particular one or this one, which is the A minor version of the same chord voicing, or like in pieces in drop D tuning, you can use it as like a substitute for a G chord. Oh, it's so pretty. Or a substitute for a D minor chord. Holy smokes. Yeah. or even here it turns into a D major ninth chord. You just can't beat it. So the fingering in standard tuning, it looks a lot like a B minor seventh chord, okay? Except that this F sharp here on the fourth string at the fourth fret, I raise it to the G, okay? So then if you play it from the bottom, you leave the bottom string open, okay? So that's an E, and you get a B on the fifth string, you get a G on the fourth string. So that little bit there, that's an E minor chord, but it's what's called an open voiced E minor chord. Kind of like an open faced turkey sandwich. Same idea, but with notes, okay? So we got E, B, G, so that's an E minor triad, open voice. And then we have on the top, basically you have just a D chord, okay? It's the same fingering, but well, same notes, different fingering, okay? So that's just a D major triad on top. It's what's called a second inversion D major triad. A, D, F sharp. And if you play all 6 notes together, oh yeah, E, B, G, A, D, F sharp. And the brilliant thing about that particular voicing is that a minor 11th chord, which is what that is, it's an E minor 11th, it has 6 different pitch classes in it, okay? And in this particular case, you're playing 6 different pitches on 6 different strings. That doesn't happen very often in the guitar. Very often, you either end up repeating a lot of notes in octaves, like you do here with a standard E minor chord. Okay, there's 3 E's, right? So the E here, and E. So the E pitch class is represented 3 times in 3 different octaves. There's 2 B's, and there's 1 E. G rather, 1 G. So it's a nice voicing, okay? But because there's only 3 pitch classes in the chord, the triad, you end up repeating a lot of them in order to play as many strings as you can. But with this one, you've got 6 different pitch classes on 6 different strings. And that, like I say, is really rare on the guitar. Very often, if you have that many notes in a chord, you end up having to leave some out because you usually can't finger all of them. So it's magic. So I suggest try it. It's so much fun. It's such a nice chord. I call it the John McLaughlin chord because I think I heard it on a John McLaughlin tune when I was like 12. E minor 11, yeah. E, G, B, D. That's right. Exactly. Thank you, Mark. He spelled it out for you. Oh, no, it's actually the voicing on the guitar. Yeah, that's right. That would be the keyboard voicing if you did it just in scale order. E, G, B, D, F sharp, A. That is E minor 11th. And this particular voicing of it is the notes are in a slightly different order. That's all. So E, B, so you jump a fifth, and then G, and then A. So those are only a tone apart, which is kind of cool. So E, B, G, A, D, F sharp. Rat Purdy. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. You're welcome, Mark. Let's see now. Tell us about your early connections to London, Ontario, and southwestern Ontario. You used to come around here much more often. Yes. Well, first of all, I used to live in southern Ontario for a long time. I lived both in downtown Toronto, and then I lived in a small town northeast of Toronto for a bunch of years. So altogether, probably a good 20, almost 25 years, I lived in southern Ontario. So getting to London, Ontario was, 2-hour drive. Most of the time, it wasn't so bad. 2.5 hours, depending on where I was living. And I had a connection with a guy there at Saunders Secondary School. His name was Rick Pichet. He's since retired. He lives in Manitoulin Island now. But he brought me to Saunders Secondary to play public concerts. It must have been 7 times, yeah. And I would do like an afternoon session with the guitar students, and then I would do an evening public concert, and it was a fundraiser for the guitar program. I did millions of those. Plus, then I ended up working a lot with another promoter who brought me in, and then I started going to the Aeolian Hall. The last time I played the Aeolian was 2019, so that not so long ago. With Don Ross Louder Than Usual, this 4-piece jazz quartet that I have, a 4-piece quartet. How's that for redundancy? But so not that long ago, just pre-pandemic. I've been talking to them now about coming back to the Aeolian in April of 24, so within the next year. So that's cool. But thanks. Yeah, I used to come quite often for sure. Got the favorite chord in there, and let's see. Got just another 5 minutes or so here. Have I listened much to Hiromi? This is Brian Tursby asking, have I listened much to Hiromi Uehara? We saw her in a solo concert here at the Music Instrument Museum, and it was okay. Thank you. That's another great recommendation, which I will check out. A lot of people are mentioning things here, so I'll go through these comments and check out some of these artists you're mentioning. And I'm sure that people here watching will also like to check some of these people out. So do that. Thanks, Brian. I'm sure if you thought she was good, then she's good. All right. Murray Harrison, you can play Cobra instrumentals, but usually have a lot of difficulty with mine. Any tips? They're usually just so hard in comparison. Well, I tend to write tunes that are very, very dense, that are very orchestral almost. Bruce is great, and I think his guitar instrumentals are wonderful. For the most part, he has concentrated mostly on moving bass lines and melodies simultaneously without too much going on in the inner voicings, and that's okay. That's one way of writing. It's actually a very common way of writing for guitar. If you listen to most of Andy McKee's tunes, they tend to follow that pattern too, where there's a strong bass line, a strong melody, not a lot of inner voice work. My tunes are very what I call kind of vertical construction. So by vertical, the horizontal construction is kind of more like there's these lines that kind of do this, but vertical construction, I kind of think there's, in my case, there's a lot going on at every moment. And it's almost like there's these big clangs going on, these large collections of things happening all simultaneously throughout the piece for the most part. So there's bass lines, melody lines, inner voices. I tend to think more orchestrally or more pianistically when I write for guitar. It's just something I've always done. And part of it was because I didn't grow up listening to a whole lot of guitar music. And I wasn't prejudiced by what I was hearing too much. I listened to Bruce for sure, and then eventually to people like Leo and Michael, who again were doing very unusual, different kinds of things on the instrument. Michael was also a very orchestral style writer, and Leo could be as well. So it might be one of the reasons. My tunes are very dense. Like I say, there's a lot of density, a lot of vertical construction in them. So I usually suggest to people just basically go through them more slowly than you would a lot of guitar tunes, because they're not really written in a linear way. They're written with kind of a very large structure in mind at all times. And I'm trying to play as many of the strings as I possibly can pretty much all the time. So chew off like 4 bars at a time, go more slowly. It's maybe more frustrating in a way, because you kind of feel like, oh, you want to get her done kind of thing, or you're feeling like you're not achieving very much. But I mean, I remember years ago when I learned, I had to learn the Adagio movement from the Concierto de Aranjuez by Rodrigo for an orchestral show I was doing, and I'd never learned a piece like that in my life, and it's really hard. The crazy thing is, Rodrigo wasn't even a guitar player. He was an orchestral writer, but he decided that he wanted to write a guitar piece, so he worked with a guitarist to make sure that everything was playable. But man, it ain't easy. And maybe the fact that he wasn't a guitar player is one of the reasons why it makes it extra challenging, because he was thinking outside the box. He wasn't a guitar player. So, but it's a short piece. It took me a month working every day on it to learn. Sometimes it's a big Mount Everest of a climb to learn tunes, and I know my tunes, a lot of them are very dense, and you have my sympathies. But thank you though for even trying to learn them. Thanks, Murray. Uehara. Okay, you did little Uehara. Okay, so Hiromi Uehara is the name of that guitarist that Brian mentioned. All right. That chord makes you think of Tony Rice. Oh, that's cool. He liked it too, eh? Oh, well, John Martin actually came up with that C minor 11th tuning. The same chord I use in my C minor 11th tuning is Strebe Griebling. Wow. Is that a Peter Cook and Dudley Moore reference? Ooh. Sir Arthur Strebe Griebling? Anyway. Sorry. Completely past memory stuff going on. Yes, the C minor 11 tuning that I use a lot is based on that E minor. It's the exact same voicing down 2 whole steps down to C. And I thought I had invented the tuning, and then somebody pointed out to me that John Martin uses it for his song called Solid Air, which came out in like 1972. So I guess it was down there in the recesses of my brain I love that song. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I don't pronounce Chinese characters very well, but thank you very much for saying that I'm your favorite guitar player. That's very nice. Louis Claudel, hi Don. Always loved your music. I started guitar very recently, but your left hand thumb area hurts like hell when you do chords, most likely because I press too hard when doing the chords. Yeah, what I tell people is that it's really important to treat your left hand if you're a right-handed guitar player. Most people are. Even left-handed guitar players normally pick or strum with their right hand and then finger with their left hand. To treat your hand like a C clamp, so that your thumb and your fingers are doing equal amounts of work, so that when you go to press, your thumb is supporting your fingers. Your thumb isn't doing all the work. Your fingers aren't doing all the work. You're doing this. You're squeezing that neck, and then you develop a certain kind of elegance eventually. At first, everything like this is hard to do, and you're trying to do something that it's not really natural. Playing an instrument is not exactly the most natural thing in the world. It's not like putting food in your mouth or whatever. It's very fine motor, so it takes a bit of getting used to. And I'm sorry, you have my sympathies, Louis. You have to change something, but should I focus on using my thumb less and pressing with the other fingers more? Like I say, it should be kind of even on both sides, finger and thumb. Okay? Hope that helps. Yes, Peter Cook reference. Thank you. I thought so. The Frog and Peach. Remember that? Okay. And one more question, and then I better tap out for today. Let's see. Steve Lawrence says, check this out. But, Steve Berry, he's telling Steve Berry to check it out. I do like this based on the earlier stuff. Froggy Funk Monkey. Cool. I will check that out offline. Thank you very much. Yeah, 50-50, Louis. That's probably the best way to do it. That's the way I think of it anyway. All right, you guys. Wow, this was a lot of fun. Thank you. We'll do this more often. Here, I'll play a tiny bit of one more tune just to close out. Yeehaw. All right, Blaine, I'll come to Seattle. Okay, I'll do it. I know. I haven't been to Seattle yet. That's really bad. I played Seattle many years ago with Eddie McKee. I'll come back. All right. Thanks for dropping in, you guys. Really nice to see you. Don Ross Guitar Academy. Check it out. DonRossOnline.com. Check it out. All right. We'll see you real soon, I'm sure. Okay. Bye bye.